Thank you for tuning in to Hacks and Hobbies with your host, Junaid. In Season 2 of Hacks and Hobbies, we're visited by our amazing guests coming from all walks of life who want to learn their story, their struggles, and their journey on how they got to where they are today. So stick around. Yeah, tell us about yourself and how you got started and
Well, yeah. Again, so what I'll do is I'll go back to the point that you were saying about the fact that I'm been sort of multifaceted my whole career.
Yeah.
And again, that stems from the fact that when I finished university and didn't really know what I wanted to do, just had a degree in psychology. There's really nothing you can do with a degree in psychology. And so I took all of the university's tools and aptitude tests and what were my strengths and what were my interests, personality, Myers-Briggs, all that stuff, and it basically all whittled down as a suggestion for me to go into marketing or be a priest, and I was no priest.
Like, I'm not gonna be
so and then all of the articles that I was reading in terms of what jobs would be in demand, what careers would be in demand, what type of employee would be in most demand. One repeated theme that I saw was that the ideal employee of the future would be multifaceted. And I thought that was great because I didn't want to be stuck doing one thing my whole life anyways. Now, what's funny is that throughout the majority of my career, what I would say is that, one is that people would look at my resumes and be like, okay, this is really cool. You've done some really interesting things, but what the hell are you, or who the hell are you? And people were very sort of confused by, what I did. And it was difficult along the way to find jobs that allowed me to do that full breadth of activity and fulfill all of those interests. And, I always was hit up too with the whole sort of jack of all trade, master of none. Right. But funnily enough, all of a sudden, and especially now later on in my career, it's all coming together. And it's very funny. And even now to this day, in a way, it doesn't fit in because people will say, niche down. And you know what, but now I kind of use that in terms of, okay, I can niche to different audiences for different particular verticals. But my niche is the fact that it's kind of 360, it's marketing at large. It's both sort of, some experience and training and understanding of traditional marketing tactics and behaviors and training with a lot of modern strategies and techniques and social media in particular being a big game changer. So in a big nutshell, I've kind of found a way to kind of make 360 marketing sort of my thing. And that is my niche. But I wouldn't be able to do that also if I didn't network out and work as a virtual agency model as I do, and reach out to all kinds of other talented people working all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's so cool, because like you mentioned, people telling you got to niche down. I have the same problem. Like, the more you talk, the more I see it myself in you, because I started Hacks and Hobbies because I have 100 hobbies. And my buddies told me, you should have a podcast, so you should talk about these hobbies. And I was like, all right. So I'm talking about beekeeping, I'm talking about cycling, I'm talking about woodworking, I'm talking about videography, filmography, you name it, right? Web development, podcasting, all of these things. And then I keep thinking about niching down, and I keep hearing this, and I keep seeing people accelerating. It's like, if you niche down, you can accelerate your growth and scale because you only have to worry about this amount of people on this specific topic. And I keep thinking about that, and I'm like, I'm sure there's a way for me to get to that point, but to get there has to be some kind of support system that I can use all of these different talents to come to that somehow. So it's still a work in progress. And I love that you made that work for yourself, because you're focused on marketing, you focus on production and focusing on these areas, but then also reaching out to these specific markets and like, hey, we can do this niche advertising marketing for you, in turn helping them, which then helps you in growing your company. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, here's a big part of it too, was really kind of trying to narrow down and understand what are the things that I find fulfilling, that I really enjoy doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then making sure that I was sort of outsourcing more of the stuff that was occupying my time, that maybe was an interest, but that really wasn't the best use of my time.
Yes.
It's funny because lately, there's a couple of big things that I've had, and I haven't really actually been announcing a lot of what is in the works for this year, but around this time now, we're sort of getting to the point where I can. One is that, so I'll be speaking at the Global Digital Marketing Summit in Jamaica.
Awesome.
That is in April or May.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and also launching my own training academy with a partner, Deborah L. Kerbel, who's a very good events marketer located here in Toronto. And so been really kind of wrapping my head around some sort of trying to wrap my head around some big ideas specifically for the marketing community. But what's funny is that I've come to the realization again that how important mindset is. And I've spoken a lot about it on my show. And I'm not at all somebody who's into any kind of the hokey, I don't personally necessarily meditate. I'll sit and I'll dedicate time to thinking. I don't necessarily, but there's nothing, I don't want to get any kind of like magical about it at all.
Yeah.
But I have certainly learned, and in part having that background in psychology has taught me a couple of things. One being in the importance of mindset and how much the way we think has an impact and is deterministic of our outcomes.
Yeah.
And that, just the power of visualization. This is why it doesn't really matter, again, like I said, however you want, whatever's right for you. If you have a sort of want to take almost like a more spiritual direction to it, and you do want to meditate, that's fine. That's totally fine for you. Prayer or visualization or whatever it is that works for you is fine. But without a doubt, the science behind it is that it works.
Yeah.
Right. And it's been funny too with my show. I've actually been bringing on guests like philosophers, for example, whose aim it is to sort of serve as a Noah's Ark of ancient wisdom and civilization. And I've had a lot of chats with people about Stoic philosophers and again, similarly, recognizing that, if things aren't going well in your life or in your business, in your marketing efforts, whatever it is, one is are you blaming other outside factors? Or are you taking responsibility for it yourself? Exactly. Are you changing the things that you can, accepting the things that you can't? All of these things are major factors. So here's one of the big picture conclusions, and this is sort of out there, and so it's funny to be on a show and then just sort of vent this kind of stuff out. But I've come to the conclusion that success boils down to the optimal integration of being, whether that's your business or whether that's yourself. And some of this, in a way, stems from a quote from Gandhi, who said that happiness is when what you say and what you think and what you do are in harmony. And I hear a lot of people also sort of talk about this idea too of like work-life balance, and how that's a sort of a ridiculous idea, that it implies that you have to sort of take from one in order to give to the other, whether, in terms of work-life balance, whether that's your work, your life, your play, yourself, all these things.
Yeah. And
it's when you see them all in one sort of box, right, that as one thing, and find harmony and there's consistency in everything that you do. And this applies to a business too. This applies to a brand, right? If it is a fully integrated being, if what that business says is what it does, if it says, here's the problem that we solve,
Mm-hmm.
and they do it,
Exactly.
then that amounts to success. That begets success. That was a big rant, but
No, that's absolutely true, because what people don't realize is that, sure, it's easy to say compartmentalize, right? So,
right, compartmentalized.
your work is separate, your life is separate, it's easy to say, and we hear about it in the movies and the TV shows. You got to learn to compartment. I don't even know how to say it.
Compartmentalize.
Exactly.
Compartmentalize your life. Yes. Okay.
It's impossible, because it to be human is to be one with yourself. And if you can be one with yourself in all aspects of your life, then you succeed. Because you don't succeed initially, but at least you're in the oneness. You have that self-awareness of, hey, this is what I can do, and this is what I cannot do. This is where I can bring people in to help me. This is what I can do and offer services to others. So I think it's very, what you mentioned in all of this is really, really powerful stuff.
Yeah, and it's not like the thing. What I would say to that, when you bring up that term, compartmentalization, is that I don't think that our brains are capable of not compartmentalizing things. It's how it is in part, like how our nature, and it's something that I've also sort of come to realize is, whatever it is you do, like, do not legislate, do not plan, do not organize in any way against nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's for sure it's part of our brains. But again, what the message behind what I'm saying, what I think you're touching on here too, is exactly when all of those things are in alignment, when they're in a harmony, when there is no disconnect, when there's no hypocrisy between them.
Yeah.
You are closer to success. And I feel like once at the level, once I start talking about these things, I feel a sense of obligation to approach it humbly and honestly, and say, hey, by the way, my shit stinks too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't always follow my own advice. I don't, and there are people who are smarter than I am, and more experienced than I am, and better educated than I am, and more articulate than I am.
Yeah.
But these are the things that certainly where my head has been at.
Exactly.
But it's been very funny how I've been finding recently too, with posting content, how you have to allow people to get, you have to trust people to know what they need at the time and allow them to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very funny. Like, I've been doing this little campaign for fun in a way. It's just really this like be ballsy campaign with a bunch of posters, and it's a quote with us from some historical figure.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them was of Muhammad Ali, and somebody come up and said, I at one point when I was younger and kind of finding myself, I needed to brag and boast myself up and so on. And it's funny how once he's what he said, it's like, I needed that for my confidence, my self-confidence at the time. And it really made me realize, what exactly, like, sometimes being a little older and seeing kids, and let's say I see kids, maybe sometimes I see kids and I see them almost, let's say, looking up to someone like Gary Vee, thinking, okay, if I swear, if I'm more like, so in your face.
Yeah.
And on one hand, I'm like, hey, you don't have to try so hard. You need to first focus in and maybe find yourself and not worry so much about the bravado. But, when I see a comment like that, then I say, no, that's right for that kid at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody has their own journey, and there's no need to compare yourself with somebody else, because everybody is unique in their own thinking, in their own mind, in their own circumstances that they had to go through to be at that point. It's really,
yeah, and your point is really good. I mean, to channel your competitive nature inwards and make yourself your own competitor is also a very useful sort of mindset
Mm-hmm.
tool that I would say that I use, and it's important because again, it's also, again, I think it's in our nature, and there's no way of fighting against it, that we
Yeah.
for sure have, what you call, let's say, like status monitors.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help but see what the other person has, what they, and you're constantly assessing your status. The question I think with these days that people need to get their heads out of that ranking idea, or just sort of accepting it and just say, well, whatever. Like, even if you feel that you're sort of, okay, you know what, I feel like I'm a little low on this totem, what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Climb yourself up. It does no good to sort of begrudge
Right.
somebody who's further up on that totem pole. We have this weird kind of societal caricaturization, of these greedy, wealthy millionaires
Yeah.
who are sucking all of us dry.
Yeah.
Well, who are they? Right? I mean, we know who they are. It's Bill Gates. It's Mark Zuckerberg. Right? It's right. So, and are these guys standing on a balcony with rifles shooting at poor people? No.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's not how they're living their lives, and it's not how. In fact, they too are earnestly trying to do, I think, in many cases, a lot of good in the world. Many of them.
Yeah.
There's always bad apples amongst the.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of the points that you mentioned about, it's so much easier to see what somebody else is doing, and that's why reflection is so important. Like when you wake up in the morning and you're washing your face, you're reflecting and you can fix your hair, but then when you're done, you know what you look like. So we need to have a mirror in front of us to see how you're doing. And so reflecting is important in that you can see how somebody else's status is, how many hearts you've got. Like when I look at you, I see, like for example, if you have some kind of an augmented reality, you can see
Yeah.
all the things that you're doing, but I can't see that for myself unless I hold up a mirror to myself. So I think that's important. And then when you mentioned about using yourself as the or competing against yourself, that's exactly how Michael Jordan became who he is, because he would compete against himself. He's like, I don't care what everybody else is doing. Steph Curry is the same story. He would get up at 6 a.m. in the morning and be out shooting hoops from the 3-pointer line. And that's all what he did. People would be rolling in. So if you're not working hard, like super hard and like busting your chops, then you can compare all you want with somebody else, but then you don't know what they're doing to get to where they are.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is that for those people, and this is certainly the case for me, it's that when you say busting your chops, in part it's because what they're doing is very much aligned with what they love to do and are passionate
Exactly.
about. So in a way, it's not work.
Mhm.
Like, that's the one thing about that quote, going back to that quote from Gandhi is it's been a pet peeve, and I brought this up on other shows, how people treat happiness like it's some destination.
It's not.
Exactly. It's
It's a journey, I think.
right. And so, I often say that the closest thing to it is, it's whatever it is that you do that you're passionate about and that you feel in flow when doing it, where the passage of time it melts away and you don't even experience it. Then you're happy. You're not sitting there with a big giant smile on your face. You're immersed in what it is that you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And again, part of it is because, actually, again, this is another sort of realization, is that we as people are meaning seeking above all else.
Yeah.
We're not wealth seeking or actually success seeking or status seeking necessarily, as much as meaning seeking.
Yeah.
And this is the beautiful thing about what we do as communicators, by the way, because I can't think of a living thing
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't communicate.
Oh,
Right?
yeah.
Like, a flower wants to communicate its availability
Mm-hmm.
of pollen to a bee. trees communicate their availability through all, in weird all kinds of ways. Even individual cells like amoebas organize themselves and vibrate and communicate.
Yeah.
What we do is we attempt to facilitate communication.
Mm-hmm.
If I get hired by a flower, my job is to make that flower look as appealing to all the bees as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I do.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing, because I think that meaning, a lot of that does stem from the fact of our ability to communicate.
Yeah.
It's the connection with people that what we ultimately seek,
Exactly.
and playing a part in facilitating that, and facilitating the connection between solutions, people's problems and people's pain points, and the solutions to those.
Yeah.
I enjoy it.
No, very, very, very awesome. And it's funny that you mentioned bees and, being flowers being attracted to bees. So bees have they have an ultraviolet vision. They can't see like the reds and whatnot. But what's funny is when a flower is ready to be pollinated or has pollen, it shows up as different color to bees, which attracts them. So when they go to them, and when they've collected all of the pollen from them, they can move on, and other bees won't go to it because they're like, hey, it's not that same color. Like
It's I mean, this stuff is amazing. And what's even equally amazing, or maybe even more amazing, is the intercommunication between the bees themselves and their wiggle dance, right? Which conveys a huge amount of data, a huge amount of information,
ton of it.
from this little tiny incredible creature. So it's at the core. There's something about that is at the core of what we are and who we are.
Exactly.
And I like the fact that we're kind of tapping into that.
Yeah. Well, so you said you have a speaking engagement coming up in Jamaica.
Yeah.
Well, I would invite you to look for Angel Jones. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Okay.
Jones, Engel Jones. He's on a mission to get 1001 podcast interviews done this year.
Holy smokes.
In 2017, he managed to do 846 episodes in 12 weeks. Then in 2018, he traveled all across the United States, every single state, and visit Canada, and basically all the people he had interviewed in 2017 he got to meet. So
Holy smokes.
yeah, I just saw his Facebook post, and he said that he has the certificate of acceptance to the 50 state club. Apparently there's a 50 state club that you become a member of when you've traveled every single state within certain days. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested, I mean, he's always looking for guests to come on to his podcast, and your background in psychology and background in talking to philosophers, I really love it, because I love going deep into the mind also, and it's really cool, like how many similarities we have between each other than there are differences.
Absolutely, man, and I think that's usually the case for most people.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the time. But yeah, and so you've been into video production, but it's interesting, right? Like again, like that's a unique mix, because you also were saying earlier that come from a UX background,
Mm-hmm.
right? And, so all of this stuff is very relevant today. UX is very, very relevant again in the marketing landscape at large, because of really its introduction of agile methodology and design thinking, which people don't talk as much about today.
No.
And my personal take is this: it's funny because like again, coming from the industry for a while, I would say the better part of my experience worked under what people call the waterfall approach, or BRUF, the bottom up priorities. But but agile methodology really comes from software development. And the thing is, though, is that this is the pace of the world now for everything. Right? And everything. So this iterative approach is very relevant. I would also say that, by the way, like there's always been an element of agile. There was always an element of agile within waterfall,
Mm-hmm.
and agile slash design benefits
Yeah.
from some of the structure of waterfall. But it's a concept that's really important for everybody to wrap their heads around, and this actually ties in. Actually, I'm really glad that the conversation went here, because this ties into what we were talking about in terms of, again, what I would say is our silos. So we could say it's silos of the mind or silos of a business.
Yeah.
They have to be integrated. They have to be in harmony now.
Absolutely.
This is because this is the pace of the world now, and this is the pace of business, that everything can inform every other chain within in it. And so everything has to become iterative. It allows you, in creating that structure for a company, for a business, it allows you to become more adaptive and to change course. But this is all stems from, we're still very much trapped in between the industrial age of thinking and the information age of thinking.
Yes.
In the information age, really, you have to sort of break down those silos, those categorizations.
Yeah.
Whether it's in your mind or whether it's in your business.
Absolutely. And I think the internet has helped in many ways to break down those silos. Like, you got to know all of these things to be able to present yourself online, right? And like, one of the main things that UX designers and focus on is, user advocacy, empathy, understanding your users, understanding the people, the humans that are using your products. In the latest book by Seth Godin, This is Marketing, he talks about empathy, having empathy for the people you're marketing to, the people that you're promoting your products around. And he's like, it just turned out to be in such a way that marketing and advertising were in the same bucket for the longest time, but they're totally two different things. When you're talking passionate about something, you're essentially marketing about that product, but you're not selling it to somebody. You're just expressing how you feel and what it makes you feel. And I think a lot of the companies are realizing that and finding the empathy and focus, trying to get better at it. And
empathy is critical to communication, right? You can't. First of all, you really don't have any communication if you're not listening.
Yes.
Right. So and listening, empathy is a component of listening. It's also it's not just hearing the words, the input. It's internalizing it. It's personalizing it. It's right, and it's a skill, and it is absolutely, you're right, a critical skill in marketing. And Seth Godin's a genius for sure.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, when did he start blogging? And I looked him up. I think it was like sometime June of 2002, one blog post, and he talked, and the title was boring. And he's like, he was stuck in some city, and he went to the market, and he's like, all the markets were so boring. It's like after you've shopped online, shopping, shop at a store, because you can't search as fast as you can when you're shopping online. And it's really funny. It's really interesting. But okay, so we've had some really awesome conversation about marketing. Communication is super important, and having the empathy to understand and listen, the philosophy, the psychology of it all. And when you mentioned that, when you did your bachelor's in psychology, and you're like, what am I going to do with having a psychology degree? Well, you can see exactly where it led you, because psychology, anything,
Yeah.
right?
It's funny, and I'll bring it back to one thing with that too, because this is funny that I've been thinking a lot about too. And one of the people that I'm a big fan of is in the realm of psychology is Carl Jung, and he's the guy who came up. There's two things that I find myself constantly coming back to. Two quotes. One is him, this quote of him saying that people don't have ideas; ideas have people. And this is, I think a lot about that because of just in the context of the difficulty and the challenge to genuinely have an original idea. And again, in terms of like, this is why often I find myself, it is for that reason that I didn't try so hard to have original ideas now. I decided to focus on what are the things that I want to remind people about or not forget about. Some of that are again, some old, let's say, branding principles, some understanding of where we came from in terms of marketing. Some of it, again, goes back to traditional education philosophies, Greek, philosophies, etc., that I think are worth preserving. But the other thing that Carl Jung is very well known for, again, is his concept of the zeitgeist, right? This sort of universal consciousness. And what I find very interesting is, again, how nature is kind of replicates itself, or there's a certain sort of fractal quality to the universe itself, right? Like you can zoom in at various layers and still see common patterns. And how things connect and how people connect is very similar, as is, let's say, a bacterial growth. Not to be cynical about about humans, but we do the same thing. So when you brought up again the internet, and then you bring up psychology, this is what sometimes I think this is what we're doing. We're rebuilding the zeitgeist digitally, and it's in its infancy. And so what you see, part of it means that actually what you see is that sort of almost the infancy of our behavior, the infancy of ourselves. That's all of the crap that you see sometimes on Twitter, or the way that people behave. But I do believe that there are enough people having conversations like these that are at least that there's enough of that sort of zeitgeist influence steering it towards what it is. What I think that's what we're doing. Whether we're, and I don't know that we're necessarily conscious of it. I don't think we are.
No, you're absolutely right. And if you saw the interview Elon Musk with Joe Rogan, and they talk about AI and talk about how Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Snapchat, they are the big beings that are collecting and learning, doing the data modeling from our behavior. Like we are essentially teaching the computer how we behave and learn from that. Pretty interesting. All right, so we've got some questions towards this point in the conversation. What is one hobby that you wish you got into?
Oh, wow. Oof, that's a good one. I've done a lot in music, and I guess I could say I've done it all. I mean, I wish that I certainly, would have loved to have gotten in, like learned piano officially. A lot of the stuff that I did, I taught myself. I didn't teach guitar. I taught myself guitar when I was in university. I kind of taught myself drums starting in high school. So I played a lot of instruments, but I certainly would have loved to have started early. At the end of the day, yeah, I think maybe painting or something. I mean, the funny thing is for sure, there's several things that I could say that I am. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a web developer. Maybe I'm a copywriter. All of these things, but a lot of it boils down to being an artist.
And what's funny is that programmers make the best artists because the way they use
absolutely
and programming in itself is an art, because not every developer will write the same number of lines of sentences to come to the same. It's pretty powerful.
Right. Oh yeah. No, it is an art. It is a way of thinking. A great way that working with, and I've worked with a lot of developers, and one of them had this very great way of putting it. And what I should preface this with is that he was a very hard worker. He would burn midnight oil until that program worked the way according to spec. But he would say, programmers are fundamentally lazy. And what he really means by that isn't that they're lazy, want to sit around, on their couches eating Cheetos all the time. It's just that they love identifying a repeated task and then finding a solution that now eliminates the need to continually repeat that task and waste their time doing it. And it's a beautiful way of thinking.
Absolutely. All right, next question. What is your favorite movie or TV show? If none, how about a book?
Oh man, I'll answer. I'll answer for all of those. I often my number one answer for a movie of all time is Harold and Maude. It's a movie from the '70s. I think maybe like '71 or something like that. Sort of a dark humor. It's all Cat
Yeah.
Stevens music. It's just there's something very funny and very touching about it that I've always enjoyed very much. I would also add, like when it comes to movies, by the way, like Quest for Fire is also one for some reason I always come back to as being like brilliant. Like, well,
Right.
and I love all the Bournes stuff. Like for TV shows, you know what? I honestly don't watch that much TV these days. Certainly, like growing up, and one of my all-time favorites was WKRP in Cincinnati. And again, that's like, I suppose that one was the '80s or something like that, you know. But just an incredible, like, sort of variety for the cast and hilarious, and some good music in it too. You'll notice some common musical interests between stuff I put on my show and books. I will say probably the one that I always like still stands the test of time is Man's Search for Meaning.
Oh yeah.
By Viktor Frankl. You know that book? Yeah, right. So exactly. It's a very short, quick, easy read. Half of it is about his experience as a prisoner of a concentration camp and what he witnessed in his experiences of that. And again, it's a very like just incredible insight into human nature. And then the latter half being, about his theory of logotherapy, which I find a very sort of practical grounding and basis for a lot of, I guess, the mindset stuff that works for me.
Very cool, man. All right, 2 more questions. What is your favorite superhero?
Oh, geez. That's a really tough one. I wasn't much of a comic book kid, by the way. I know my brother was into Thor a lot, and there certainly was something very cool about Thor and the mythology sort of behind him, and just his hammer and all this stuff. Like there was something pretty damn cool about him. And Superman is always a fascinating one. And it's actually, you know what, like it's fascinating from a marketing perspective in a way, right? Because I don't know how well you know the history of Superman, but he originally had a number of limitations. He could just jump over buildings and that sort of thing. But then his powers expanded and expanded and expanded to the point where he was essentially like completely omnipotent. Like there's nothing, you couldn't harm him. And the second that he had no limitations, he became boring.
Kryptonite.
There's something instructive about humans in that, right? That we this idea, like we can always make. I definitely believe we can make the world a better place. But but having this expectation or this of a utopia is almost unhealthy in the sense that it's not even what we want.
So much fun, right?
It goes with the territory. Like I said, I've been there. I've been very lucky today. That,
awesome.
These guys have been pretty good.
Last question. If you were a board game, what would it be?
Oh, I mean, I'd have to choose chess. I mean, it's a very multi-layered, complex game, like anybody is.
Perfect, man. So where can my audience find you? Where can they go?
Oh, okay, yeah. So for sure, if they want to hear or watch the YouTube videos, BIYF.marketing is our website. And again, that stands for balls in your face. .marketing. My business website is jdnevins.ca. That's jdnevins.ca. And I am Julian.space. I haven't really played, touched, or done anything on that page for a long time, mind you. And certainly I'm on LinkedIn and around on Facebook and so forth. So please tune in, subscribe. We've got season 2 coming up of BIYF. Some really good guests lined up for that. We had an amazing lineup of guests last year in 2018. So I'm really stoked for that as well.
Man, thank you so much for your time. This is awesome. We learned so much cool things from you, and definitely keep in touch. Learn more of how your automation is working to create, bring your YouTube to your podcast and back and forth. I figured out some things where I published my podcast, and then there's a service that'll create a video of the podcast audio, but then it's not the same as the interaction of video that you.
Does it create good skins for
I've
it
got
so
a
that you
few
can?
selection of skins, and I was like, I'm going to customize mine. So I created a custom skin for it. And then, yeah.
Great.
So this
Great.
is
What's that?
repurpose.io. I can send you the link to it.
Cool.
But yeah, there's a lot of cool things. I'm experimenting. Like, a thought just popped in my head. Like, I'm asking these same 4 questions from all of my audience. I can make a short video of that question and then post it up and see what that.
Oh, absolutely. This, you can break these up into many, many, many videos if you want. You can recycle them. There's nothing wrong with that, with any of that.
Cool.
So I'd love to, like if you throw it up online, if there's access to it, I would love to take. I'm sure I could find something in there to use and play with.
Thanks so much.
Cool. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Congratulations, you made it to the end of the episode. Thanks so much for listening to our guest on this episode. Please send me an email at junaid@hacksandhobbies.com to tell me what you loved about our guest today. You could find links mentioned in this episode on the hacksandhobbies.com website.